life was a Baptist minister. He then became a Unitarian pastor for the next 11 years of his life, and then following that, he quit and started the first humanist church in New York City. Now, if Charles Francis Potter was a minister of some sort for 22 years, he certainly understood religion. And in 1930, he wrote a book on his experiences called Humanism, A New Religion. He asked the question in chapter 9, is humanism a religion? And his conclusion is, quote, it is both a religion and philosophy of culture, unquote. Francis Potter says, education is the most powerful ally of humanism, and every American public school is a school of humanism. What can the theistic Sunday schools, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching? This was back in 1930. Our argument is that the situation is a lot worse today than it was in the 1930s.
Roy Wood Sellers, author of Humanist Manifesto 1, claimed that traditional religion was dying and humanism is the coming new religion. In 1955, he was honored as a humanist pioneer by the American Humanist Association.
Now, what's interesting about Humanist Manifesto 1 is that Roy Wood Sellers had no qualms in using the word religion and religious throughout the whole manifesto. And he made it very clear, really to his followers at least, that humanism was a religion. In the manifesto itself, Roy Wood Sellers says, to establish such a religion, and he's talking about the religion of humanism, is a major necessity of the present. I mean, how can we get it any clearer than that? We are establishing a religion, and it's not the religion of Christianity. That's the problem. Humanist Manifesto 2 was primarily written by Paul Kurtz, who is considered today the #1 humanist in our country. He's the editor of Free Inquiry. He wrote the preface to both Humanist Manifesto 1 and 2, because now they're published together. And in the preface of that edition, Paul Kurtz literally says humanism is a religious, philosophical, and moral point of view. And he uses the word religion as part of his definition of humanism. Now, he has backed off of that since that time, but the truth is, at that time he knew. He knew. The only reason he's backing off today is because he cannot afford to have a humanism identified as a religion, because the same arguments would be used against that as were used against Christianity to eradicate Christianity from the public square. In Manifesto 2, Paul Kurtz literally uses theological language. And on page 16 of the manifesto, he says, but we can discover no divine purpose or providence for the human species. While there is much that we do not know, humans are responsible for what we are and will become. And then he makes this great statement, no deity will save us, we must save ourselves. So literally the difference between Christianity and humanism is very simple. Christianity believes that Jesus Christ saves, and humanism believes that some human saves.
Lloyd and Mary Moraine are signatories of Humanist Manifesto 2 and were designated Humanists of the Year in 1994. Both he and his wife view humanism as the fourth faith and the next great world religion.
One of the past presidents of the American Humans Association was Lloyd Moraine. And back in the 50s, Lloyd and his wife Mary wrote a book called Humanism as the Next Step. He entitles chapter 1, The Fourth Faith. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what the other three faiths are, because the subtitle of his book is An Introduction for Liberal Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. So he's referring to Protestantism, Catholics, and Jews as the first three faiths, and humanism as the fourth faith. In fact, he makes it very clear. He says, humanism is a philosophy of men's relations to one another and to nature, rather than of men's relations to deity. And then he follows that with a quote from Julian Huxley. Julian Huxley is among those who believe that humanism will be the world's next great faith. Now, the whole book is trying to show that the fourth faith indeed is going to replace the previous three faiths of Judaism, Catholicism, and Protestantism.
Just as Christian or Muslim students need a chaplain to minister to them, so do students who adhere to the humanist worldview. Such religious services are provided for humanist students on many university campuses today.
I think it's important to show that even our universities are recognizing humanism as a religion, not just some religious right-wing organization. But here we are in the very center of the whole humanist activity in our country. Our universities basically are the hotbed of humanism in our country, and they themselves recognize humanism as a religion. I'm referring to at least four that I know of: the University of Auburn, the University of Arizona, the University of Minnesota, and Harvard University all officially recognize secular humanism as a religion. At Harvard University, the humanist chaplain is Thomas Farrick. Thomas Farrick has been there for a long time. He is sponsored by the American Humans Association and was sponsored until his death by Dr. Corliss Lamont, who wrote the famous book on philosophy of humanism. At Harvard University, Thomas Farrick admits the following: when first-year students voluntarily indicate their religious affiliations during registration each year, fewer than 200 check off humanism. So at Harvard University, you can literally check off humanism as your religious affiliation. In the Harvard Gazette newspaper, Thomas Farrick also reveals that he's not too worried because only 200 check off humanism as a religion. The reason he's not worried is the following: as a non-authority figure, referring to himself, he says, "I'm not as needed. Not only do these students require less guidance, but they are being constantly reinforced in their humanist beliefs in the classroom." So why should he worry? If only 200 check off humanism as a religion, but in the classroom all the students are getting their humanistic education, Thomas Farrick sits in a pretty good chair.
The lawyer who argued the Torcaso versus Watkins case before the Supreme Court was the 1988 Humanist of the Year, Leo Pfeiffer.
One of the most important lawyers for the humanist over the years has been Leo Pfeiffer. Back in 1977, Leo Pfeiffer wrote a very telling article entitled "The Triumph of Secular Humanism." It was published in the Journal of Church and State. I want to mention what he says. He's talking about the American campus. He says, "In this arena, that is on college campuses, it is not Protestantism, Catholicism, or Judaism which will emerge the victor, but secular humanism." Now, if secular humanism was not a religion, then why didn't Leo Pfeiffer say the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and even the Socialist Party are finished, because it's going to be secular humanism that is going to triumph on our campuses? He didn't say that. He put secular humanism amongst the religious. He says that secular humanism, a religion, is going to triumph over three other religions, i.e. Judaism, Catholicism, and Protestantism.
The evidence is overwhelming. Secular humanism is a religion and is being taught freely in today's public schools. True, most educators don't call themselves secular humanists. Many public school teachers are committed Christians seeking to counter the secular humanist influence, and many more are men and women who rarely promote their own agenda. Unfortunately, these educators are often thwarted by the organized minority, teachers who preach secular humanistic principles, often cloaked behind terms such as values clarification, outcome-based education, or academic freedom.
By teaching naturalistic evolution, ethical relativism, and political correctness, teachers are indoctrinating students with a secular humanistic worldview. For these educators, the mere acknowledgement of the God of the Bible is offensive. In 1986, Dr. Paul Vitz, a professor of psychology at New York University, was commissioned by the U.S. government to study the state of education in our public schools.